Namaste to one and all. I welcome you to yet another episode of Śabda-yoga. In this episode, we will discuss two terms together, that is Kliṣṭa and Aklishta. As earlier, we will look into the etymological derivation, the lexical references and textual occurrences of these two very important terms in the context of yoga. First, now let's get into the etymology of the word. Both these words, Kliṣṭa and Akliṣṭa, are taken together because there is only a slight variation in the form of the word, though there is a meaning difference that will also be brought out. The comparison and contrasting will also be convenient if those two words are taken together. Hence also, those two words were taken together. Now, let's get into the etymology of the first word, that is Kliṣṭa. So, you can see here that the root is klish, and with the addition of the suffix ta, it becomes Kliṣṭa. So, Kliṣṭa, Kliṣṭa. So, it's in a feminine form. So, it is a longer end it has. So, Kliṣṭa. Now, when we consult the traditional Sanskrita roots, we see that the two roots are possible to the word Kliṣṭa. So, one is Kliṣ upatape. That means to be ill, to be sad, to suffer. That is one root. The other root is Kliṣ vibādhane. Vibādhana refers to torment, to distress, to hurt, to suffer, to misbehave. All these. So, two possible roots and all the meanings that emerge from those are applicable in the derivation of the word Kliṣṭa. Then the suffix, that is kta. What does it mean? What does it add to the word? So, it means karma. It indicates karma, the object of the action. So, the root conveys upatapa and vibādhana, the act of upatapa, to be ill, to sad, to suffer, etc., to torment, distress, etc. So, the object or the karma of this action, so that which is tormented, that which undergoes the torment, or that which is afflicted, that which suffers. So, that object of the verbal root, that is indicated by the suffix kta. So, nishtha is the grammatical rule by which this kta is added to the root klish. So, then going by this derivation, we get the meaning klishyate yam iti Kliṣṭa. So, that which is afflicted, to put in just a simple word. So, that which is afflicted is Kliṣṭa. In the yogic context, we see Kliṣṭa Vṛttihi. So, the vritti is the one that is afflicted. So, hence, so Kliṣṭa points to Kliṣṭa is an adjective to the term vritti. So, Kliṣṭa Vṛttihi. So, in that sense, we derive the word Kliṣṭa. Then, so now the word Kliṣṭa is ready. Now, Aklishta. So, it is not derived from the word. It's just a compound. What happens? Not Kliṣṭa. Na Kliṣṭa, Aklishta. So, that which is not Kliṣṭa. So, that which is not an object of torment or suffering or affliction. The vritti. The vritti, that which is not afflicted, becomes Aklishta. Na is not, Kliṣṭa is that which is afflicted. So, that which is not afflicted. So, this is a Nai Tatpurusha compound. It's based on the grammatical rule 9 from the Ashtadhyaya. So, as I have mentioned earlier, both the words taken up for discussion, Kliṣṭa and Aklishta. So, they are feminine forms because they qualify the term vritti. Vritti is a word in feminine gender. Hence, they are Kliṣṭa, Aklishta, Vṛttihi. And these two terms, Kliṣṭa and Aklishta, are adjectives to the term vritti. So, this much of a grammatical, etymological clarity we first gain from this first activity of etymological derivation on these two terms, Kliṣṭa and Akliṣṭa. Now let's move on to the lexical references. What are the entries that we find in lexicon like Amarakosha? So we find two entries to the expression Kliṣṭa. Sankula Kliṣṭe Parasparahatam. So that's one entry. Sankula Kliṣṭa Parasparahata. So these are the expressions which are used to indicate self-contradiction. So that is one meaning. So Sankula, Kliṣṭa and Parasparahata. So these expressions indicate self-contradiction. These are used to indicate self-contradiction. That is one reference. Kliṣṭa, Kliṣṭe. There is another reference from Amarakosha where the word Klishta and Klishita, both of them point to affliction. So that meaning which is available or used in the yogic context, we can see is Kliṣṭa, Kliṣṭe. So Klishta or Klishita are the two expressions which are used to indicate affliction. But elsewhere in other texts, the word Klishta is also used to indicate self-contradiction. So, but that is not found in the yogic context. So this clarity emerges when we look into the etymology, the lexical input on the word Klishta. So the possibility of the meaning of self-contradiction is also there in Sanskrit grammar or Sanskrit literature, but in the yogic context predominantly we see the meaning that which is afflicted, that which has attained affliction. Now we move to the third arm or the third activity of Śabda-yoga, where we get into the occurrences of the term in the various texts, especially Yoga Sūtra, Bhagavad-gītā and Haṭha-yoga-pradīpikā. So in Yoga Sūtra, there is just one reference of these two expressions, Vrittaya Panchataya Kliṣṭa Kliṣṭa. So the fivefold Vṛttis, the sutra is very well known. The fivefold Vṛttis are further of two types. The Pramana, Vipareya, Vikalpa, Nidra Vṛttis are of again two types. That is Kliṣṭa and Aklishta. So these are the two types of two variations of the five types of Vṛttis. So this is conveyed in the first chapter. Now on this sutra, especially on the terms Kliṣṭa and Aklishta, I had earlier published a paper in a peer-reviewed journal, New Light on Kliṣṭa and Akliṣṭa Vṛttis, based on the traditional Sanskrit commentaries of Yoga Sūtras. And I am going to share with you a few insights, inputs, ideas derived from my paper from the traditional commentaries on the expressions Kliṣṭa and Aklishta based on my paper, which was published in 2016 in Yoga Mimamsa journal. Now we see that when we go into the traditional commentaries, Vyasa, the primary commentator, primary principal commentator, he beautifully defines the term Kliṣṭa Vṛtti. The Kliṣṭa Vṛtti is defined as Klesha hetukaha karmashaya prachaya kshetri bhutaha. That's the way he puts the Kliṣṭa Vṛtti. So two dimensions or two aspects of Kliṣṭa Vṛtti is brought out from Vyasa's commentary. Klesha hetuka and karmashaya prachaya kshetri bhuta. So the simple translation or the direct translation is Kliṣṭa Vṛttis are those that are caused by kleshas, afflictions, and are the fields of accumulation, of deposit of karma. So beautifully put. So later in the second chapter, there is going to be elaboration in the Patanjali Yoga Sūtras about the five kleshas. Avidya, Asmita, Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha. So Kliṣṭa Vṛttis are those which are klesha hetukas, which have kleshas as their cause. So that which are caused by the five kleshas are Kliṣṭa Vṛttis. That is one idea from Vyasa's commentary that emerges on Kliṣṭa Vṛttis. The second idea he says, is karmashaya prachaya kshetri bhutaha. Karmashaya, deposits of karma, means whatever actions we do, they are either punya or papa. They are that is called as the karmashaya, the storehouse of all the karmas. So before yielding the result, before the vipaka, fructification, those are segregated as samskaras in our chitta according to yoga philosophy as punya karma and papa karma. The deposits of punya, the records of punya, papa karma, they are the karmashayas, and when the Klishta Vṛttis are there, they are the ones which act as fertile fields for the proliferation of more and more deposits of actions. So one has to recall the 4th chapter sutra where karma is of 3 types. Yoginaha. For yogi, there is only 1 type. For others, it is of 3 types. So karma, ashukla, akrishnam, yoginaha. Trividham itaresham. So a yogi, if he follows all the yogic practices, so for him, his actions will neither be shukla nor be krishna. Neither will he accumulate the punyas, neither will he accumulate papas. So the deposits of karma, as has been mentioned, karmashaya deposits will not grow for a yogi who follows yogic prescriptions and yogic way of life. Because when there is karmashaya, it necessitates the next birth. So by following the yogic way of life, what happens? There is no deposits of those karmashayas for a yogi. But for others who don't follow the path of yoga, their mind or their life is influenced by the kleshas. Their mind is full of Klishṭa Vṛttis, and so karmashaya prachaya kshetri bhutaha. So as long as there is these these Klishṭa Vṛttis, then what happens? So there is accumulation of the karmashayas, so which will necessitate further and further lives. The yogi has to reincarnate again and again, which lengthens his suffering. And the very purpose of yoga is to overcome all dukkha, heyam dukkham. But these Klishṭa Vṛttis, which act as the field of proliferation of the karmashayas, will lead to more and more births, and thereby leading to more dukkha. So these 2 very beautiful insights emerge from the commentary of Vyasa, which is connected to, so Klishṭa Vṛttis are those that are caused by the kleshas, pancha kleshas, and Klishṭa Vṛttis are the fertile fields in which the karmashayas get more and more deposited, accumulated, leading to or prolonging one's suffering. So on this input from sage Vyasa, we see Vachaspati Mishra's commentary. So when the expression Klesha Hetuka is clarified by Vachaspati Mishra as Kleshaha Asmitadayaha Hetavaha Pravrittikaranam Yasam Vrittinam Tas Tathoktaha. Because grammatically the Klesha Hetuka can be interpreted as those vrittis which stimulate the kleshas. That is also possible. But Vachaspati Mishra here clarifies, no, those vrittis, those are instigated by kleshas. They are Klishṭa Vṛttis. It's not the other way around. So in Samskrita compound, both ways are possible. Klesha Hetuka can be those that stimulate the kleshas or instigate or incite the kleshas, or those that are incited or stimulated by the kleshas. But Vachaspati Mishra clarifies, so the Klishṭa Vṛttis are those which emerge because of the kleshas. So that clarification that comes from Vachaspati Mishra's commentary. And additionally, Vachaspati Mishra says the primary sub-commentary to Vyasa's commentary, very respected commentary, scholarly commentary by Vachaspati Mishra, also states Klishṭa Vṛttis are the Rajasika Tamasika Vṛttis. So a guna dimension is added by Vachaspati Mishra. So along with its connection to the kleshas, their implications on the karmashaya, the deposits of karma. So the guna connection to the kleshas as that of them being rajasika and tamasika emerges from the Vachaspati Mishra sub-commentary. And then there are other Sanskrita commentaries which have their views on the Klishṭa Vṛttis. We are now talking only about Klishṭa Vṛttis. I will next mention about the Aklishta Vṛttis also. So most independent commentators, the Sanskrita commentators, take Klishṭa Vṛttis as either to be influenced by kleshas, that is avidya, asmita, etc., or inducers of klesha. So both these views exist among the other commentators, whereas Vachaspati Mishra has very clearly said that kleshas, Klishṭa Vṛttis are those which are caused by kleshas. But in independent commentators, we see a divergence of view. And then here we see Bhoja and Sadashiva Brahmendra advocate the former view, and whereas most others like Nagoji Bhatta and Ramananda and Narayana Tirtha, they subscribe to the latter view. So latter view is inducers of kleshas. Former view is influenced by klesha. So these variations in meaning are presented. But the primary commentator and the most scholarly Vachaspati Mishra commentary sets to rest all these doubts and makes it a very clear explanation where Klishṭa Vṛttis are those that emerge from or instigated by kleshas. So normally when we also think, so Vṛttis, they emerge from samskaras. So these kleshas like avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha are but samskaras and vasanas. So from such vasanas and which are of samskaric or kind of impressional nature, so these vrittis emerge. Hence they are Klishṭa Vṛttis. And so in that sense, Vachaspati Mishra's view seems very clear on the explanation of the term Klishta. Now we move to the term Aklishta Vṛtti. Here also Sage Vyasa, excuse me. So Sage Vyasa has given an explanation to the word Aklishta Vṛtti. Again, it's very precise description of the Aklishta Vṛtti. Khyati Vishayaha Gunadhikara Virodhinyaha Aklishtaha. So again, two aspects. So Aklishta Vṛttis are those that have Khyati as their content. So Khyati Vishayaha. So Aklishta Vṛttis are about, or they contain the Khyati in them, and then they oppose the sway of the gunas. So two aspects. And again, we take recourse to understanding, take recourse to the commentary of Vachaspati Mishra in understanding these two terms, Khyati Vishaya and Gunadhikara Virodha. So we see that Vachaspati Mishra says that, so all these quotations, all these the screenshots are from my paper, which I quoted earlier. Now, what does Vachaspati Mishra say while commenting upon these two expressions as Aklishta Vṛttis as Khyati Vishaya and Gunadhikara Virodhinyaha? So he says, when the mind is free from the effect of Rajas and Tamas and is peaceful, the knowledge of difference between Prakriti and Purusha is experienced. This is Khyati. So beautifully, the word Khyati is explained. What is Khyati? Khyati is knowledge. Knowledge about what? The knowledge about the difference between, or the non-oneness, that Prakriti and Purusha are not one and the same. There is difference between them. So this knowledge is called as Khyati. And this Khyati will come about clearly when there is no Rajas and Tamas. When such knowledge of discrimination exists in mind, any further commencement of worldly activity is suspended. So Aklishta Vṛttis are those which reduce the Rajas and Tamas in the mind, lead the mind to a peaceful state, whereby what happens? The clarity that Prakriti is different and Purusha is different, such Khyati emerges. So the Aklishta Vṛttis, they which are nothing but vrittis which are generated by the practice of yoga, the yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, all those practices and the imbibing of yogic values, they lead to the emergence of sattva in oneself, rajas and tamas go down, and then the vrittis emerge, which contain khyati, this khyati as their content. So this is Aklishta Vritti. So this is one description of Aklishta Vritti. When such Aklishta Vritti hold the sway in the mind, then what happens? Further commencement of worldly activities are suspended. As long as there is a lack of understanding about what is Prakriti and what is Purusha, one is attuned towards worldly experience, bhoga. But when the clarity or the khyati holds sway in the mind, then what happens? Movement outwards to the world is suspended, and the very nature of the gunas is to commence some or the other activity. So the very purpose of the gunas is to start, involve, engage a person into various activities. But when the khyati is there, the gunas cannot initiate any action. So as the dawning of the above said knowledge opposes the commencement of any new activity, thus the sway of the gunas is blocked, and hence they are called as Aklishta Vṛttis. So two things happen by the following of the yogic practices. The vrittis that are generated are also Aklishta Vṛttis, and those Aklishta Vṛttis lead to a sattvic state of mind where the content of the vritti themselves become khyati. So khyati, those vrittis that contain khyati in them, they are essentially Aklishta Vṛttis. And then when the content of the vritti becomes khyati, then that such vrittis, they oppose the activities of the gunas in engaging a person in outwardly activity. So this is also another implication of Aklishta Vritti. So as these two terms are unambiguous, all other commentators are either in agreement to what Vachaspati Mishra says or do not comment. So in this way, and we can see that the Aklishta, another dimension of Aklishta Vritti is Sattvika aspect. While Klishta Vritti is Rajasic and Tamasic, Aklishta Vritti is Sattvik. So all these ideas emerge from the commentary literature which has been captured in my paper on Kliṣṭa Akliṣṭa Vṛttis. So this is about the reference of the Kliṣṭa Akliṣṭa terms in the Yoga Sutra, and these are the inputs from the traditional commentaries. So when we go to the Bhagavad-gītā and Haṭha-yoga-pradīpikā, as such in Haṭha-yoga-pradīpikā there is no reference to the word, but in Bhagavad-gītā there is one reference on the term Klishta. Yattu pratyupakarartham phalamuddishya va punaha dhyate cha pariklishtam taddanam rajasam smritam. So there is a associated term pariklishtam. So that is there in the Bhagavad-gītā. So this is in the context of dhanam. So charity, sharing one's resources with others, giving to others. So dhanam, in the context of Rajasika dana, you see the expression pariklishta. So Rajasic dhanam is pariklishtam. What is the meaning of the word pariklishtam? Acharya Shankara Bhagavad-pada says, with a lot of suffering. A person who is Rajasic in nature, but still involves in the act of charity, giving things to people. How does he do that? Pratyupakarartham. He gives and expects something in return. That is Rajasic Dhanam. And then Phalamuddishya means he gives so that something else is facilitated by this act of giving. It's not selfless giving. And then Diyateja Pariklishtam. And while giving to others, while helping others, he gives with a lot of suffering. He does not want to part with what he is giving. So that is Pariklishtam. So naturally, it is Rajasic only. Previously also we saw in the Yoga Sutra, by the commentators it was clarified that Rajasic activities are Klishta. So the Klishta Vṛttis are either Rajasic and Rajasic or Tamasic. And this Bhagavad-gītā reference that clarifies that or stamps an authority on such an interpretation that Rajas is Klishta only. So this is an additional reference or one lonely reference that we find from Bhagavad-gītā in connection to the expression Klishta, but we don't see the expression Aklishta either in Bhagavad-gītā or in Haṭha-yoga-pradīpikā. Thus we see that the expression Klishta, Aklishta is a predominantly a Yoga Sutra expression which has been given a lot of treatment, description, detailed analysis in the Yoga Sutra commentaries. Even in Yoga Sutra, there is just one sutra which describes it, but still it's elaborated in the commentaries, and later also you find the description of avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, those kleshas being explained. So predominantly this Klishta, Aklishta expression is from the Yoga Sutra, and where is that there was just one passing reference from Bhagavad-gītā, and so and no references in Haṭha-yoga-pradīpikā. So basically it's a Yoga Sutra expression. And even in the traditional commentaries of Yoga Sutra, we see three aspects of Kliṣṭa Vṛttis. I'm just summing it up. Three aspects of Kliṣṭa Vṛttis just to remind and conclude. We see Kliṣṭa Vṛttis are the ones that are caused by the kleshas. Kliṣṭa Vṛttis are the ones that are caused by the kleshas, and then they generate a lot of karmic deposits which leads to later birth, and then they are Rajasic and Tamasic in nature. So this is in short, in capsules, what Kliṣṭa Vṛttis mean. And then for Aklishta Vṛttis, we again see three aspects again brought out by the traditional commentary. They lead to Khyati, means the clarity, the discrimination that what is Prakriti and what is Purusha. And then they oppose the sway of the Guna Adhikara Virodha. So they won't facilitate, they further would not instigate the actions of the Gunas and are basically Sattvic in nature. So such clarity about what is Kliṣṭa Vṛtti, what is Aklishta Vṛtti has emerged from the traditional commentaries, and those traditional commentaries are now discussed as part of this Śabda-yoga activity, which brings out the relevance of this Śabda-yoga activity. And finally, to conclude, an observation on yoga research, yoga therapy in connection with this Kliṣṭa and Akliṣṭa Vṛttis. And this is the conclusion that I have given in my paper also, which I quoted earlier. I would want to share it with you. So in the current scenario, it can be observed that a research on yoga seems to be preoccupied with evaluating the empirical outcomes of yoga, which of course is essential. True efficacy of yoga might be evaluated if parameters of measurement are correct and innate to the system. So based on the discussions in the write-up, it can be concluded that Patanjali seems to have indicated the impact of various practices on Klishta and Akliṣṭa Vṛttis as the measure of efficacy of yogic techniques. In other sources are also there in the Yoga Sutra, where we can see the outcome can be measured in terms of Akliṣṭa Vṛttis. So as there are scales of measurement of three gunas, its psychological scales, etc., are there, which are inventories are made on the gunas. Similarly, efforts are to be directed to define and develop scales to identify and evaluate Klishta and Akliṣṭa Vṛttis of the Chitta arising out of the various. So to what extent yoga practice themselves cause klesha, or to what extent yoga practice leads to the Aklishta state of mind. So this can be evaluated. Or in the normal worldly state or transactional state, how the mind is proliferated by the Klishta Vṛttis, and when getting into the state of yoga, how it leads to the Aklishta state. So to evaluate all these, we need scales. So this is the final concluding observation that I had made in the paper. And so it is essential that such scales to measure Klishta and Akliṣṭa Vṛttis are essential to understand the real impact of yoga in the real yogic sense, the innate yogic sense. So these are the observations on the Kliṣṭa and Akliṣṭa Vṛttis. Namaste. Thank you very much.